Belinda Johnson stood frozen in the doorway of the Whitaker mansion, watching three 6-year-old boys turn the elegant living room into a war zone. Paint was splattered across the white walls, expensive furniture was overturned, and feathers from torn pillows floated through the air like snow. But what shocked her most wasn't the destruction, it was the pain in their eyes. "You can't make us like you!" screamed Tommy, the oldest triplet, hurling a toy truck at her feet. "We don't want another nanny, we want our mama!" His brothers, Danny and Bobby, stood behind him like soldiers ready for battle, their little faces streaked with tears and dirt. They had driven away 17 nannies in 6 months, and they were determined to make Belinda number 18. But as Belinda looked at these heartbroken children, she didn't see monsters. She saw 3 little boys who were drowning in grief and terror, desperately trying to protect themselves from being hurt again. "I know you miss your mama," Belinda said softly, stepping carefully over the broken toys scattered across the floor. "And I'm not here to replace her. I'm here because I think you need someone who understands what it feels like when your world falls apart." The boys stopped throwing things, surprised by her gentle words. No nanny had ever talked to them like this before. Tommy stared at her with suspicious eyes. "You don't know anything about us." Belinda knelt down so she was at their eye level. "You're right. I don't know everything about you yet, but I know that you're scared. I know that you're angry, and I know that you think if you're mean enough to me, I'll leave just like all the others did." The 3 boys exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this response. "But here's the thing," Belinda continued with a small smile. "I'm not going anywhere, and by the end of today, I'm going to show you something that will change everything." Tommy's eyes narrowed. "What?" Belinda stood up, brushing feathers off her dress. "I'm going to show you that it's okay to let someone new care about you, even when your heart is broken." Just then, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway, and the boys' faces went pale with fear. "He's coming," Danny whispered. "Daddy's going to be so mad about the mess." But what happened next would shock everyone in that house, including the man who had spent 6 months believing his sons were impossible to reach. 6 months earlier, John Whitaker sat in his corner office on the 45th floor of Whitaker Industries, staring at his phone as it rang for the 3rd time that morning. He knew it was either his assistant with another nanny crisis or the boys' school with another incident report. He was right. It was both. "Mr. Whitaker," his assistant Rebecca said when he finally answered, "I have bad news and worse news." John rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar headache starting. "Give me the bad news first." The school called. The boys started a food fight in the cafeteria, locked their teacher in the supply closet, and refused to come out of the playground tunnel when it was time for class. John sighed deeply. "And the worst news? Nanny number 17 just quit. Mrs. Patterson said, and I quote, 'Those children are possessed by demons, and no amount of money is worth risking my sanity.'" John felt like his world was crumbling. 6 months ago, he had been a successful businessman with a beautiful wife and 3 happy children. Now Sarah was gone, killed in a car accident that had shattered their family, and John was drowning trying to be both father and mother to 3 heartbroken boys who seemed determined to destroy everything around them. "Rebecca, call the nanny agency. Tell them we need someone immediately." "Sir, I already did. They said they're out of candidates. Word has gotten around about the boys, and no one wants to work for the Whitaker family anymore." John stared out his office window at the city below. He was worth over $2 billion, but all his money couldn't solve the most important problem in his life. His sons were falling apart, and he didn't know how to put them back together. At 35, John had built an empire from nothing. He was brilliant, determined, and had never met a problem he couldn't solve. But grief had changed his boys into strangers, and John felt helpless watching them spiral into anger and destruction. The truth was, John was struggling with his own grief. Sarah had been his best friend, his partner, and the heart of their family. Without her, John felt lost and overwhelmed. He worked longer hours because it was easier than facing the empty house and his son's accusing eyes. The boys blamed him for their mother's death, though they never said it out loud. Sarah had been driving to pick up a surprise gift for John's birthday when the accident happened. The guilt was eating John alive, and he knew his sons felt it too. "Sir?" Rebecca's voice brought him back to reality. "What should I do about finding a new nanny?" John thought for a moment. "Post an ad online. offered double the usual salary. Someone out there must be desperate enough to work with my sons. But John had no idea that the person who would answer his ad would change all their lives forever. 30-year-old Belinda Johnson sat in her tiny apartment, scrolling through job listings on her laptop while rain drummed against her window. She had been out of work for 2 months, ever since the family she worked for had moved to another country. Belinda had been a nanny for 8 years, and she loved working with children. But lately, the job market had been tough, and families wanted younger nannies with fancy degrees and perfect references. What families didn't see in Belinda's resume was her special gift. She understood pain. Belinda had grown up in foster care after her parents died in a house fire when she was 7 years old. She had been passed from home to home, never staying anywhere long enough to feel safe or loved. By the time she aged out of the system at 18, Belinda had learned to recognize the signs of a child in emotional pain. She had also learned that sometimes the children who acted the worst were the ones who needed love the most. When Belinda saw John Whitaker's job posting, she almost scrolled past it. The description was intimidating. Seeking experienced nanny for 3 energetic boys. Previous nannies have found the position challenging. Competitive salary for the right candidate. But something in the carefully chosen words made Belinda pause. Previous nannies have found the position challenging. That was rich people speak for, our kids are out of control and we're desperate. Belinda did some research on the Whitaker family and found the story that changed everything. 6 months ago, Sarah Whitaker had died in a car accident, leaving behind her husband and 6-year-old triplets. Belinda's heart ached as she read the news articles. She knew exactly what those boys were going through because she had lived it herself. The fear, the anger, the desperate need to push people away before they could leave you too. Those boys don't need a nanny, Belinda said to herself. They need someone who understands. She spent the rest of the night writing an application that was completely different from any resume she had ever sent. John sat in his home office the next morning, dreading the interviews he had scheduled. The house was unusually quiet because the boys were at school, but John knew that peace wouldn't last long. Rebecca had arranged meetings with 5 potential nannies, and John wasn't optimistic about any of them. Most people took one look at his son's reputation and ran in the opposite direction. The first candidate arrived at exactly 9 a.m. She was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who had worked for several wealthy families. "Mr. Whitaker," she said crisply, "I understand your children have behavioral issues. I believe in strict discipline and firm boundaries. I've never met a child I couldn't control." John felt immediately uncomfortable. His sons didn't need to be controlled. They needed to be healed. The second candidate was a young woman fresh out of college who seemed bright and enthusiastic, but John could tell she had no idea what she was getting into. "I just love children," she gushed. "I'm sure once the boys see how fun I am, they'll forget all about being sad." John thanked her politely and moved on to the next interview. The third and fourth candidates were similar, either too strict or too naive to handle 3 traumatized children. Then Belinda arrived. John opened the front door to find a woman in her 30s with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile. She was wearing a simple but professional dress, and she carried herself with quiet confidence. "Mr. Whitaker, I'm Belinda Johnson. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me." As they walked to his office, John noticed that Belinda wasn't looking around the mansion with the wide-eyed amazement that most people showed. She seemed more interested in the family photos on the walls than the expensive artwork. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Johnson," John said as they sat down. Belinda took a deep breath. "Mr. Whitaker, I don't have a college degree in child development. I don't have certificates in early childhood education. What I have is 8 years of experience working with children and a childhood that taught me what it feels like when your world falls apart." John was surprised by her honesty. "What do you mean?" "My parents died when I was 7. I spent the rest of my childhood in foster care, moving from family to family. I know what it's like to be scared that everyone you care about will leave you. I know what it's like to push people away because it hurts less than being abandoned." Belinda leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Whitaker, I've read about your family's loss, and my heart breaks for what you and your sons are going through. Your boys aren't bad children, they're grieving children. And grief in children often looks like anger and defiance." John felt something he hadn't felt in months: hope. "The previous nannies all said my sons were impossible to manage. That's because they were trying to manage them instead of trying to understand them, Belinda said gently. Your sons aren't trying to be difficult, Mr. Whitaker. They're trying to survive. For the first time since Sarah's death, John felt like someone truly understood what his family was going through. Miss Johnson, I have to warn you. My sons have driven away 17 nannies in 6 months. They can be destructive. Belinda smiled. Mr. Whitaker, I've worked with children who set their foster homes on fire because they were afraid of being hurt again. I've worked with kids who broke everything they touched because they felt broken inside. Destruction is just pain with nowhere else to go. John stared at this remarkable woman who seemed to see his sons as human beings instead of problems to be solved. When can you start? He asked. The next morning, Belinda arrived at the Whitaker mansion at 7 a.m., carrying a thermos of coffee and a bag of homemade cookies. She knew that first impressions mattered, especially with children who had been hurt. John met her at the door, looking exhausted and stressed. The boys are still asleep, but they'll be up soon. Are you sure you're ready for this? Belinda handed him the thermos. Thought you might need some coffee. And Mr. Whitaker, I want you to know that whatever happens today, I'm not giving up on your sons. John was touched by the simple gesture. When was the last time someone had thought to bring him coffee? Thank you, Miss Johnson. That's very kind. Please, call me Belinda. At exactly 7:30 a.m., the sound of running feet echoed through the house, followed by shouting and the crash of something breaking. They're up, John said with a grimace. Belinda followed the noise to the kitchen, where she found 3 identical boys with dark hair and bright blue eyes engaged in what looked like a syrup war. The kitchen island was covered in sticky mess, and one of the boys was standing on a chair, preparing to dump an entire bottle of orange juice on his brothers. Food fight, yelled one of the boys when he saw Belinda in the doorway. Instead of getting angry or trying to stop them, Belinda did something unexpected. She laughed. Wow, she said, walking calmly into the chaos. You guys are really good at making messes. I'm impressed. The boys stopped mid-fight, confused by her reaction. You're not going to yell at us? Asked one of them. Why would I yell? This looks like it was actually pretty fun, though I bet you're all sticky now. The boys exchanged glances, clearly thrown off by Belinda's calm response. I'm Belinda, she continued, sitting down at the kitchen table as if sticky floors and food-covered children were perfectly normal. And I brought cookies, but I guess you're probably too full from eating all that syrup to want any. We weren't eating it, one boy said defensively. We were throwing it. Ah, I see. Much more fun than eating it, I bet. What are your names? The oldest boy, who seemed to be the leader, crossed his arms suspiciously. I'm Tommy, that's Danny, and that's Bobby, and we don't like nannies. That's okay, Belinda said cheerfully. I'm not really a nanny anyway. What are you then? Danny asked, curious despite himself. I'm a friend who happens to know how to make really good cookies and tell awesome bedtime stories. Bobby, the youngest, perked up. What kind of stories? All kinds. Stories about brave knights, magical animals, and kids who go on amazing adventures. The boys were clearly interested, but Tommy wasn't ready to let his guard down. We don't want friends, he said firmly. Friends leave. Belinda's heart ached at the pain in his voice. You're right, Tommy. Sometimes friends do leave. Sometimes people we love leave, even when they don't want to. The boys went quiet, and Belinda could see tears forming in their eyes. But you know what I learned? Belinda continued gently. Just because someone leaves doesn't mean they didn't love you. And it doesn't mean that everyone else will leave too. Our mama left, Bobby whispered, his voice breaking. I know, sweetheart. And I bet that hurts so much that sometimes you feel like your chest is going to break open. All 3 boys nodded, tears now flowing freely. Can I tell you a secret? Belinda asked softly. They nodded again. I lost my mama and daddy when I was just a little older than you. And for a long time I was so angry and scared that I tried to push everyone away. I thought if I was mean enough, people would leave before I could get attached to them. The boys stared at her with wide eyes. Did it work? Tommy asked quietly. For a while, but I was so lonely, and I missed out on knowing some really wonderful people because I was too scared to let them care about me. Belinda reached into her bag and pulled out the cookies. These are chocolate chip. They were my mama's favorite. I make them when I miss her. She placed the bag on the table. You don't have to eat them if you don't want to, and you don't have to like me if you don't want to, but I'm gonna be here every day, whether you're good or bad, happy or sad, because that's what people who care about you do. They stick around." The kitchen was silent except for the sound of the boys sniffling. Then Bobby, the youngest, took a tentative step toward the table. Can I try a cookie?" he asked shyly. "Of course, sweetheart." Bobby took a bite and his eyes lit up. "It's really good." Danny and Tommy exchanged glances, and slowly, they too approached the table. As the three boys ate cookies and began to relax around Belinda, John watched from the doorway in amazement. In 20 minutes, this woman had accomplished what 17 previous nannies couldn't do in months. She had reached his sons. But John had no idea that their peaceful morning was about to be shattered by news that would threaten to tear their fragile new beginning apart. John's phone rang just as the boys were finishing their cookies, and his face went pale when he saw the caller ID. It was his lawyer, Marcus, and he only called when there was serious trouble. "John, we have a problem," Marcus said without any greeting. "Channel 7 News is running a story tonight about your family. Someone leaked information about the nannies quitting, and they're painting you as a negligent father who can't control his children." John felt his stomach drop. What exactly are they saying? The headline is, "Billionaire's Demon Children Drive Away, 17 Nannies. Are the Whitaker triplets out of control?" They have interviews with 3 former nannies who are calling the boys dangerous and emotionally disturbed. Through the kitchen doorway, John could see Belinda sitting with his sons, all of them laughing as Bobby told her a silly joke. For the first time in months, his children looked happy and peaceful. "Marcus, can we stop this story from airing?" "I'm trying, but it's going to be difficult. John, there's something else. They specifically mentioned that you just hired a new nanny yesterday. They're probably going to target her next." John's blood ran cold. If the media destroyed Belinda's reputation like they had destroyed his family's privacy, she might leave just like all the others, and his sons would be heartbroken all over again. "I have to warn her," John said, ending the call. But when John walked back into the kitchen, he found a scene that made him stop in his tracks. Belinda was sitting on the floor with all 3 boys, and they were building something together with blocks. The boys were actually cooperating, taking turns and helping each other. "Look, Daddy," Bobby called out excitedly. "We're building a castle for Mama. Belinda says Mama can see us from heaven, so we want to make something beautiful for her." John felt tears in his eyes. His sons hadn't mentioned their mother in a positive way since she died. They had been too angry and hurt to remember the good times. "It's beautiful, boys," John said, his voice thick with emotion. But then Tommy looked up at his father with worried eyes. "Daddy, you look sad. Is Belinda going to leave like all the others?" John looked at Belinda, who was watching him with concern. He knew he had to tell her about the news story, but he was terrified that she would run away to protect herself. "Boys," Belinda said gently, "why don't you keep working on the castle while I talk to your dad for a minute?" John and Belinda stepped into the living room, and John took a deep breath. "Belinda, there's something I need to tell you. The local news is running a story tonight about my family. They're going to make my sons look like monsters, and they'll probably come after you next." Belinda listened quietly as John explained about the media attention and the damage it could do to her reputation. "I understand if you want to leave," John said sadly. "I won't blame you for protecting yourself, but I want you to know that in one day, you've done more for my boys than anyone has been able to do in 6 months." Belinda was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "Mr. Whitaker, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you believe your sons are monsters?" John was shocked by the question. "Of course not. They're grieving children who miss their mother. Then why does it matter what strangers on TV say about them?" John stared at her. Because it will affect their futures, their school, their friendships, their opportunities." "Or," Belinda said gently, "it will show them that the people who really love them will stand by them no matter what the world says." She walked to the window and looked out at the garden where Sarah used to play with the boys. "Mr. Whitaker, I've been judged my whole life. Foster kid, no parents, no fancy education. People looked at me and decided I wasn't worth much, but a few people saw past all that and believed in me anyway. Those are the people who changed my life." Belinda turned back to John. "Your sons need to know that they're worth fighting for. If I run away the first time things get difficult, what does that teach them about their own worth?" John felt his heart swell with admiration for this incredible woman. "So you're staying?" "I'm staying, but I have one condition." "Anything." "When that news story airs tonight, we watch it together as a family. All of us. And we talk about it honestly." John nodded, though he was worried about how the boys would react to seeing themselves portrayed as problem children on television. The rest of the day was magical in a way the Whitaker house hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. Belinda seemed to have an intuitive understanding of what each boy needed. When Danny had a meltdown because he couldn't find his favorite toy, Belinda didn't try to distract him or tell him to stop crying. Instead, she sat with him and let him cry, rubbing his back and telling him it was okay to feel frustrated. When Bobby got scared during their afternoon walk because a loud truck reminded him of the accident that killed his mother, Belinda picked him up and held him while he trembled, singing softly until he felt safe again. And when Tommy tested her by deliberately spilling paint on her dress, Belinda just smiled and said, "Looks like we're both artists now. Should we paint something together?" By evening, the boys were following Belinda around like devoted puppies. They helped her make dinner, set the table, and even cleaned up their toys without being asked. John watched in amazement as his sons transformed before his eyes. They were still the same children, but the anger and fear that had consumed them for months was beginning to fade. "Belinda," Tommy said as they finished dinner, "will you read us a bedtime story tonight?" "Of course, sweetheart. What kind of story would you like?" "A story about a mama who goes to heaven but still loves her little boys," Bobby said quietly. Belinda's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "I know the perfect story for that." At 8 p.m., the whole family gathered in the living room to watch the news. John held his breath as the story began. Tonight at 8, billionaire John Whitaker's out-of-control children have driven away 17 nannies in just 6 months. Former employees described the Whitaker triplets as dangerous, emotionally disturbed, and impossible to manage. We'll speak with 3 former nannies who say working for the Whitaker family was a nightmare. The boys watched in confusion as their pictures appeared on screen, with words like problem children and behavioral issues flashing across the bottom. "Daddy," Danny whispered, "why are they saying mean things about us?" The first former nanny appeared on screen. "Those children are completely out of control," she said. "They destroyed property, refused to follow rules, and seemed to take pleasure in making adults miserable. I've never encountered such difficult children." Tommy's face crumpled. "Are we really that bad, Daddy?" Before John could answer, Belinda spoke up. "Boys, do you know what I see when I look at you?" The triplets shook their heads. "I see 3 brave little boys who love their mama so much that they're willing to fight the whole world to protect her memory. I see children who are smart enough to test new people to make sure they're safe to trust. And I see kids who have big hearts that are just waiting for the right person to help them heal." On the TV, the second nanny was speaking. "The father is never around, so these children have no discipline or structure. They need professional help, not another nanny." John felt his anger rising, but Belinda remained calm. "That lady doesn't know what she's talking about," Bobby said indignantly. "Daddy loves us." "You're absolutely right," Belinda agreed. "Your daddy loves you so much that he's been working extra hard to take care of you all by himself. And that's not easy when your heart is broken too." The third nanny appeared on screen, and her words were the cruelest yet. "Those children are damaged beyond repair. No amount of love or patience will fix what's wrong with them. The Whitaker family needs to face the fact that these boys may never be normal." Tommy started crying. "She thinks we're broken forever." Belinda immediately moved to the couch and pulled all 3 boys into her arms. "Listen to me, sweet boys. That woman is completely wrong. You are not broken. You are not damaged. You are hurting, and that's completely different." She looked each boy in the eyes as she spoke. "Grief isn't something that needs to be fixed. It's something that needs to be honored. You're not supposed to be normal right now. You're supposed to miss your mama and feel sad and scared. That's how love works." "But the lady said no one can help us," Danny sobbed. "The lady never met me," Belinda said with a smile. "And she certainly never met 3 boys as special and strong as you." John watched in awe as Belinda turned what could have been a devastating moment into an opportunity for healing. The next morning, John's phone was ringing non-stop. The news story had gone viral and public opinion was split between people who felt sorry for the boys and people who thought they were spoiled brats who needed discipline. John's business partners were calling, worried about how the negative publicity would affect their companies. The boys' school called to schedule a meeting about addressing the behavioral concerns raised in the media, but the worst call came from Child Protective Services. "Mr. Whitaker, we've received several complaints about your children following last night's news story. We need to schedule a home visit to assess the situation." John felt like his world was falling apart again. If CPS decided his sons were out of control, they could recommend removing them from his home. When he hung up, he found Belinda in the kitchen making breakfast with the boys. They were all wearing aprons and giggling as they flipped pancakes. "Bad news?" Belinda asked, seeing his expression. "CPS wants to do a home visit. People are calling my sons dangerous based on a one-sided news story." The boys stopped laughing and looked scared. "Are they going to take us away, Daddy?" Bobby asked in a tiny voice. John knelt down and pulled his sons close. "I will never let anyone take you away from me. Never." But privately, John was terrified. What if the social worker believed the media narrative? What if they decided the boys were better off in foster care? "Mr. Whitaker," Belinda said quietly, "may I make a suggestion? Please, what if we invited the social worker to spend a whole day with us? Not just an hour-long visit, but a real day where they can see what your boys are actually like. Do you think that would work?" Belinda smiled. "I think anyone who spends real time with Tommy, Danny, and Bobby will see what I see. 3 amazing kids who just need love and patience." 3 days later, Mrs. Rodriguez from Child Protective Services arrived for her visit. She was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who clearly expected to find chaos and dysfunction. Instead, she found 3 boys helping Belinda make cookies for their father's office staff. "Good morning, Mrs. Rodriguez," Belinda said warmly. "The boys are excited to show you their morning routine." Mrs. Rodriguez looked skeptical as she watched Tommy carefully measure flour while his brothers took turns stirring the bowl. "We're making cookies for Daddy's workers," Bobby explained proudly. "Belinda taught us that when people work hard, they deserve something sweet. And we're going to deliver them ourselves," Danny added. "We want to say thank you for helping Daddy build his buildings." Mrs. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "These are the same children who were described as uncontrollable on the news?" "Mrs. Rodriguez," Belinda said gently, "would you like to hear the boys' side of the story?" For the next hour, Belinda helped the boys explain their feelings about their mother's death, their fear of new people leaving them, and their confusion about why so many nannies had given up on them. "We weren't trying to be bad," Tommy said earnestly. "We were just scared that if we liked someone, they would go away like Mama did." "But Belinda taught us that it's okay to be sad and scared," Danny added. "She doesn't try to make us forget Mama. She helps us remember the good things about her." Mrs. Rodriguez spent the entire day with the family, observing their interactions, their routines, and their genuine affection for each other. At dinner, she watched John patiently help Bobby cut his food while listening to Danny's story about his day at school. She saw Belinda teach Tommy how to fold napkins while they talked about his worries and dreams. "Mr. Whitaker," Mrs. Rodriguez said before leaving, "I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I've rarely seen a family working so hard to heal together. Your boys aren't problems to be solved, they're children who are learning to trust again." She looked at Belinda with respect. "Miss Johnson, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. These children are lucky to have you." 6 months later, the Whitaker family had become completely transformed. The boys were thriving in school, had made new friends, and rarely had behavioral issues. More importantly, they had learned to talk about their mother with love instead of just pain. John had also changed. He had learned to balance work and family, and had discovered that being present for his sons was more important than any business deal. But the biggest change was how much John had come to love and depend on Belinda. She wasn't just a nanny anymore, she was the heart of their family. One evening after the boys were asleep, John found Belinda in the garden where Sarah used to play with the children. "Belinda," he said, sitting beside her on the bench, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "When Sarah died, I thought my family was broken forever. I thought my sons would never be happy again, and I thought I would never feel whole again." Belinda listened quietly, her hand finding his. "But you didn't just save my boys," John continued. "You saved me too. You taught me how to be a better father, a better man, and a better person." John got down on one knee and pulled out a ring box. "Belinda Johnson, I love you. My sons love you. And I can't imagine our lives without you." Belinda gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Will you marry me? Will you officially become part of our family?" "Yes," Belinda cried, throwing her arms around John's neck. "Yes, yes, yes." The wedding was held in the same garden where John had proposed, with Tommy, Danny, and Bobby serving as ring bearers. They had insisted on wearing matching tuxedos and had spent weeks practicing their walk down the aisle. During the ceremony, John and Belinda exchanged vows that they had written specifically for their unique family situation. "Belinda," John said, "you didn't just agree to marry me. You agreed to love 3 broken-hearted little boys and help them become whole again. You are the answer to prayers I didn't even know how to pray." "John," Belinda replied, "you and the boys taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice. You chose to trust me with your most precious treasures, and I choose to love and protect all of you for the rest of my life." But the most touching moment came when the boys stepped forward with their own vows for Belinda. "Belinda," Tommy said, speaking for all 3 of them, "we promise to be good boys for you. We promise to remember that Mama loved us and you love us too. And we promise to help you take care of Daddy because sometimes he forgets to eat lunch." Everyone in the garden was crying and laughing at the same time. 2 years later, John and Belinda welcomed a daughter, Lily. The boys were over the moon about their baby sister and took their roles as big brothers very seriously. "She's so tiny," Bobby marveled, gently touching Lily's hand. "We have to protect her and teach her everything," Danny declared. "Just like Belinda protected and taught us," Tommy added wisely. 5 years after Belinda first walked into the Whitaker mansion, the family was unrecognizable from the broken, grieving people they had once been. The boys, now 11 years old, were honor students who were known at school for their kindness and empathy. They often helped younger children who were struggling, using the emotional wisdom that Belinda had taught them. John had expanded his business to include a foundation that provided support for single parents and grieving families. He had learned that his greatest success wasn't measured in dollars, but in the love and stability he provided for his family. Belinda had started a consulting business, helping other families who were struggling with loss and behavioral challenges. She had written a book about healing grief in children that had become a bestseller, and little Lily was growing up surrounded by more love than any child could ask for, with 3 big brothers who adored her and parents who had learned that the strongest families are often the ones that have been broken and rebuilt with love. On the anniversary of Sarah's death each year, the family would visit her grave together, but instead of a sad occasion, it had become a celebration of how love continues even after loss. "Mama," the boys would say, "we want you to meet Belinda and Lily. We think you would really like them. And Daddy smiles again now, so you don't have to worry about us anymore." The media that had once portrayed the Whitaker triplets as demon children now held them up as an example of resilience and healing. But John and Belinda didn't care about public opinion anymore. They had learned that the only opinions that mattered were the ones that came from people who truly knew and loved their family. As Belinda tucked the boys into bed one night, Tommy looked up at her with the same trust and love that had taken months to develop. "Belinda," he said, "I'm glad you didn't give up on us like all the other nannies did." "I could never give up on you, sweetheart," Belinda replied. "You 3 taught me what I was really meant to do with my life." "What's that?" "Love you forever." And that's exactly what she did. The story of the billionaire's impossible triplets had become the story of how broken hearts can heal when they're given patience, understanding, and unconditional love. Belinda hadn't just survived working with the Whitaker boys. She had given them back their childhood, their father his purpose, and herself a family worth fighting for. Sometimes the most difficult children are the ones who need love the most. And sometimes the people who seem least qualified on paper are exactly the people who can work miracles with their hearts. If you love this emotional tale, please like, share, and subscribe for more.